Well, hello everybody. My name is Flores, and I'm a student journalist with PBS Student Reporting Lab and NewsHour. For anyone who doesn't know, PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs is a network of middle school and high school students that focuses on these young journalists reporting on the subjects that matter to them. So, just wanted to give my little introduction before going over to my fellow panelists, Caroline Lewis and Nkosi Muse. Who have amazing stories to tell themselves. So I was just going to ask you guys for a little bit, like 1 minute introduction of who you are, how you got here, and yeah, just kind of to like start us off in our panel, which is on environmental justice and local advocacy.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Repcaster, for doing so much on our behalf. Well, I'm a teenager. I know I don't look like it, but in my heart, I'm a teenager. I'm Caroline Lewis, born and raised in Port Spain, Trinidad, and I've been in Miami for a couple decades, and I'm the founder of the CLEO Institute, CLEO, and that's an acronym for climate leadership through engagement opportunities. So I believe that all of us have a role, and I have to inspire you to find your voice and share.
Good morning. My name is Nkosi Muse. I'm a second-year PhD student in environmental science and policy at the University of Miami. My research focuses mostly on climate hazards and how they affect certain communities, most specifically communities of people that look like me, Black and brown communities, and marginalized, disadvantaged communities. I also sit, on the city board, the City of Miami's Climate Resilience Committee, and I sit in the seat for marginalized and vulnerable communities. I'm an advocate for them because they don't usually have a voice in these kind of conversations. So happy to get into the conversation with them.
All right, so just to kind of start us off, I was thinking maybe we could start off with like a big idea of like what are some of the climate challenges that we're currently facing, and if you wanted to talk from like a global scale down to like local, like here in Miami, since this is where we're at right now, you guys can start us off.
Okay, so let me start. His name is Cause. We'll find out Nkosi stuff. We call him Cause. So here's the thing. You understand, I think, that the climate crisis is about this buildup of greenhouse gases that is not letting enough of that heat get back out. We are a planet, I'm a science teacher, so I cannot help myself. We're a planet that is like that Goldilocks story, we're just right. Some planets have no atmosphere, all the energy that comes in goes back out and they're frozen. Some have such a thick atmosphere of greenhouse gases that the energy comes in and very little gets back out. We're just right. Our atmosphere has enough greenhouse gases that energy comes in, a lot of it goes back out, but some of it gets trapped. So we have our seasons. What I want you to picture in your mind is how we're changing the atmosphere and how we're adding so many greenhouse gases that not enough of that heat is getting back out. So big picture, which I love. Can't just do the detail, gotta pull back, go back and forward. Split screen. You have two solutions to the climate crisis. Adapt to it, mitigate it. Transition away from fossil fuels quickly to renewable energy. When we're talking about adaptation, which we love to talk about, and we love to fund in the great state of Florida, we have to remember that there's a justice community that cannot be resilient. Right here in Miami-Dade County, there are about 3 million of us. 57% of that 3 million, so more than 1.5 million people, are poor or working poor. They cannot prepare for and recover from crises. So we have to make sure that when we talk about adaptation strategies, we aren't just expecting everybody to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. We have to keep in mind that if my septic tank fails, I have the means to try and get converted to sewer. A lot of people can't. So when toilets no longer flush, and low-lying areas have repetitive flooding, and the income inequity shines a light on that justice issue, we have to respond.
Think of the entire country and how vast it is. Tens of thousands of square miles, maybe even hundreds. And then think of Miami-Dade County, which is a pretty big county, but in the concept of the entire country, it's not that big. 26% of the land in this country that is vulnerable to sea level rise exists right here in Miami-Dade County. So again, think of the entire country and then think of Miami-Dade, this small portion, but encompasses over a quarter of all the land in this country that is vulnerable to sea level rise. Now, again, we could talk about the science a lot, and I'm pretty sure everybody here knows the science that greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere and they're trapping heat and they're making the planet warmer, which is leading to climate change. Because global warming and climate change are two completely different things. But certain people, like Caroline was saying, cannot adapt to it the same way. So my job, and what I really look forward to in the committee, I mean, of course, I keep a mitigation perspective in my mind. You know, we do have to mitigate, you know, to save the world. But for the most part, people that are contributing to this crisis are the ones, the people that are not contributing to this crisis the most are the ones that are going to face the worst consequences of it. The corporations that are emitting all these different gases, and then the people that, you know, go to work, you know, at Miami Beach hotels and things of that sort, because that's all they can get to. They're the ones that are going to feel the consequences of it, and they're not going to be able to avoid the consequences of it. So, of course, I'll keep that mitigation perspective in my mind, but I also kind of put it in the back of my mind because right now, adaptation and resilience and making sure that it's equitable across Miami-Dade's landscape is the priority. And again, for communities that can't, you know, advocate for themselves the way that others can because they have the power, the voice, the platform, the money, somebody has to speak for them. And their knowledge is usually the most important knowledge. I don't want to say too much because I know we're supposed to get into that later, but local knowledge, a lot of the times, is way more important than the knowledge that, you know, us as researchers do. Because we can go into a community and say, hey, so we think sea level rise is going to happen here, or we think it's going to get super hot here, but what if they don't feel hot there? What if they don't see flooding a lot there? You know, we're displacing them from their communities. But I'm renting. I'm really
Go for it,
this question.
No, I love it because I was just about to move into that topic of like you're talking about like marginalized communities that like they're the ones pretty much facing like the punch of this, to say the least. So
Yes.
exactly. So can you go a little bit like what are some of the unique problems that these communities are facing, and just kind of also let's delve into what is climate gentrification, which is a big issue I know in Miami, but as well as in other parts of the world. Can you go into a little bit about that?
Take my jacket off for this one.
He's getting hot.
He's getting ready.
He's heating up. Well, let me just introduce what he's going to be talking about, because sea level rise is like a gateway drug to get people to talk about climate. But it's so much more than sea level rise, right? It's salt water intrusion. It's food and water vulnerability. It's heat and health vulnerability. If you work outside and your employer is an idiot, you do not get hydration breaks and rest. So recommending it doesn't work. We have to mandate it, then police it. And talk to us about climate change.
To your point too, Miami also has one of the largest outdoor worker groups in the entire country too, right? And heat is, anyway, climate gentrification. So, if I had to ask everybody here, what do you think the biggest climate threat to Miami is, and I probably already gave it away, what would you say?
Sea level rise.
Sea level rise, you know, answer that. Sea level rise.
I'm a teenager. These kids are too deep.
There are other issues that we need to worry about? Yes, absolutely. Heat is what I focus on mostly, but sea level rise is the threat that is beyond just the science. Yes, we see that sea levels are rising in certain places, you know, subsidence is happening with different buildings. I'm sure everybody heard about, you know, the Surfside collapse of the condo. That's not just a coincidence, that's because we're built on land that is really just water. We're just floating. Flores is a floating state, honestly, at this point, because there's tons of water under us. But as that water makes its way over, people are realizing that. And they're like, okay, well, where can I go that isn't as vulnerable to sea level rise? Can anybody, who knows what redlining is? Put your hands up. Okay, good. If you don't know what redlining is, if you don't know by the end of today, then that's a problem. Redlining started it really started before this, but in the 1930s, the Federal Housing Administration issued what we call Homeland Security Maps, or Federal Security, Homeland Security Maps, in partnership with the Homeowners Loan Corporation. Now, these maps were a tool for people that they look like me. They were a tool for advantage in essentially white communities to say, where can I live that's considered desirable in certain areas? So, if you've never seen a redlining map before, a map, I like to think of it with like traffic light colors. You have the green areas that say, hey, this is desirable. I want to live here, or you should live here. Then you have the blue, which is saying this is like a cushion between the blue and the yellow, saying that you could live here if you wanted to, and you should be fine, maybe you will be fine. Then you have the yellow, which is considered slightly hazardous or declining. Now, and then you also have red. The red is like hazardous. You don't want to live here. Who do you think lived in these yellow and red areas, or who was margined to these red and yellow areas? People of color, black and brown communities. In these areas, they were not afforded the same resources. They weren't even allowed to get mortgages for their homes. So all they could do in these areas was rent. In these areas that they rented, there were also the areas that were considered not desirable, meaning these areas were also probably floodplains. They were also, urban heat islands, things of that sort. They were just non-desirable all around. And this has led to beyond climate issues. This has led to, food deserts because people don't want to build, their grocery stores there. In Liberty City, right around the corner from here, there's maybe like one grocery store in the vicinity that people like really go to. But then you go down to downtown, Coconut Grove, and Coral Gables, and there's Whole Foods and Publix and Winn-Dixie's everywhere. Anyway, so it's weird in Miami because it's kind of like a reverse trend as compared to other cities like Baltimore and New York and Richmond and Phoenix, etc., Los Angeles. Those areas that were redlined, white communities and people, that have money and have power, they don't want to move to those areas. They still want to stay, in their nice condos and downtown skyscrapers and things of that sort. But it's different in Miami because those redline areas were over there in Liberty City and Little Haiti and Overtown and Little Havana, where those people were redlined to, but they're also at higher elevation. So they're like, ooh, we put them in the high elevation areas. We're in the low elevation areas. Let's go over there and let's move them out of the way so we can have somewhere to live and not have to worry about our investments being drowned, essentially. So it's a reversing trend that's going on now, where people that live in their condos and their high rises and their nice buildings over here, on Miami Beach, right, really around the corner from here, are going over there and saying, hey, I want to put my superstore, I want to put my Starbucks here, I want to put, my new condo building here or my new high-rise apartment building here. And the trend is moving people out. And people that, really don't have a choice because they're renting, again, in these areas where people were redlined or yellow lined too, they were like 90% renters in these areas. So they're at the mercy of their landlords. So if their landlord says, hey, I'm selling this building, now Miami-Dade has a rule, I think 60 days notice, ahead of time.
Renters' Bill of Rights.
Right, the tenant bills of rights, yeah. But even then, it's still like, okay, I'll give you a 60-day notice, but you gotta go. As if Miami's rental market and housing market isn't like crazy right now. So people are having to go to places where they don't know. For example, there are people that live in Liberty City and Little Haiti. They've lived there their whole lives, and they may not have been involved in the best activities there. They may have been, gang affiliated because they have no other choice. And then they get pushed to Homestead, where there are rival gangs there, and those rival gangs are like, what are you doing here? Well, we have nowhere else to go. So it just shows you how it's beyond just the climate and beyond the physical and the science. It's also the social, because now the murder rates are going through the roof in certain places because people are going to places where they didn't grow up or they're not familiar with. So always keep in mind that this is way beyond just the science. This is so social, and it's affecting way more people than you think it is.
So just as like a last point to bring up before we have to wrap up, this discussion.
We're not wrapping.
You just get started.
I know, right? I'm like so interested, but obviously we're talking about climate justice, but also local advocacy. So what can young people, like people that are here today with us, what can we do to help this issue? I don't know if it's too late to already stop it, but just maybe slow it down. What can we do in our community essentially?
Well, first of all, run for office. All of you. Think about it. If you told a little street urchin girl from Trinidad that I would be doing what I'm doing now, I'd never believe you. So each of you think about your role. And secondly, when you say we want to create a seat at the table for frontline and disengaged communities, we don't just mean open the door. We mean go and bring them in, or go to them and meet where they are. So in 2014, when the CLEO Institute was going guns, I did a gap analysis and realized that the frontline communities, Liberty City, Little Haiti, Sweetwater, they were not coming to our education events and learning about the climate crisis. So I went to a funder to say, I need to do a pilot in 4 underserved communities, 2 on high ground and 2 on low ground. And I had to have a temper tantrum in that funder's office to get the money, and I did. I have no shame anymore. So I had a temper tantrum, and here's what they told me. First of all, we did listening sessions. We went, we listened. When I say we, CLEO never works alone. We work with all our social justice groups like universities. We listened, we came up with an agenda for a town hall. We identified a local talent who could run the town hall. So it wasn't CLEO helicoptering in and telling people what's what. And engaging them on what they cared about. Lack of tree canopy, bus stops that had no shade, emergency preparedness. And so bringing people to the table, and you have quite a role, cause you are representing marginalized communities on that committee. And so your voice is the only time some of those people on the committee are actually hearing the health concerns. Think about this. If you don't have health care and your asthma and allergies acting up, what are you going to do? So the whole idea of inequity, climate is a threat multiplier to all these social justice things. And what can you do? You can know, you can learn, you can understand, you can run for office, you can change things, and you can make sure you vote in every single election.
Yeah. I don't have too much to add to that. But Miamidade is a prime example of how the youth have showed up, and you know that better than I. I've only been here not even 2 years yet, but as soon as I got here, I wanted to dive immediately into the climate change scene, and what better place to do it than Miami? Especially because we have to fight for things here, including resilience offices for Miami-Dade. For the committee at one point that I sit on didn't have a seat for vulnerable and marginalized communities that had to be fought for. At one point, the city of Miami, there was a chief heat officer that was appointed too. I'm sure many of you have heard that too. The first chief heat officer in the entire world, Jane Gilbert. They had to convince city commission or county commission why that seat should be there because they were thinking about scrapping it at one point. So the only reason it's still there is because people came out in droves and in crowds and said, hey, we need this. And when they do that, they're heard. 3 deputy positions were also created for the Office of Resilience for the City of Miami as well. So there's a CRO, and then they have 3 positions under, supporting that role as well. These roles did not exist before people came and said, hey, we need to think more about climate resilience. The climate emergency that, I think you were talking about this before.
Yeah, we've been pushing this. We have a Gen CLEO movement, a generation of climate leaders to like your age, high school and college. And I want to tell you what I've learned from that. Do not underestimate the power of your voice. Because in 2015, we were at the budget hearings of the county commission, and those high schoolers took the microphone, dressed with suits and everything, and they let them have it. And within 3 weeks, we got the Office of Resilience for the county, budgeted for it. They asked the City of Miami mayor to declare a climate emergency. No, I will act like it's an emergency, but I will not declare a climate emergency. And the kids were like, what's this about, Carol? I said, get back in there. Nobody ever asked him that before. And within 2 months, the mayor was at the Miami declaring a climate emergency. So the power and persistence of your voice is what's going to carry the day. But I want you to know this. You're not alone. I want to be the wind beneath your wings. And many of us, our age, really want to do that too. So we're not just passing the baton. We're running the race with you. You have that final leg. But I'm running at my full might, trust me, to make sure that you all can carry the day. Because you must, and you will. And I have great faith in you. I have no doubt that the future is going to be brighter than we think.
Last thing I want to add to that before we wrap up. Oh man, I forgot.
See, on the way here, his car got hit. He was going to pass. small accident. So he's a little bit uncause-like, but
Wherever you're from, when you come to Miami, just realize that Miami folks can't drive. That's stupid. No matter where you're from, there's a way that you can get involved. I'm sure a lot of you from many different places. If there isn't a way to get involved, create it. City council, it's already made here because of people like Caroline that have made the pathways for us, to go to commission, to go to city hall, to speak to our representatives. I talk to city representatives and city commissioners on a weekly basis, if not daily. There is a way for you to do it, and if you don't do it, somebody else is going to have to. At the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to really see the effects of the climate crisis, and then our kids and their kids. So not only do we have an obligation, it's our duty.
Well, thank you so much for Caroline and Cause. And I hope that all of you have a great day. I know I'm leaving here feeling inspired, and I've learned a lot just like with our time every time I speak to you guys. I just learned so much. So yeah, just thank you so much for having us today. And
love your hair.
Yes, thank you.
thank you.